All right, new rankings are out. We'll start 25, count you all the way down to 1. Ponies are 25, App State 24, SC and Iowa State 23 and 22, and then Okie State. So a couple of Big 12 teams at 22 and 21. Now, moving up from there. If you look at number 20, that's Boise State. Cincy, a one-loss team. Memphis, a one-loss team. Kind of that mid-major one-loss teams, 20-18. Iowa, who beat Minnesota, they're at 17, and Notre Dame is at 16. Now we get to the top 15. Auburn, they lost to Georgia. They're now at 15. They dropped 3 spots to go there. Baylor only dropped 1 spot off their loss to Oklahoma. Michigan vaults up 2 spots. Wisconsin vaults up 2 spots. And Florida stays exactly what they were at 11. Now to the top 10. Minnesota, you wondered how far they would drop off the loss. They dropped 2 spots to 10. Oklahoma moves up 1 spot off that win over Baylor, where they were down 25 and rallied. Penn State goes up 1 spot to number 8. And then we start in from 7. Everybody 7 in, same spot as last week. Utah, 7 to 7. Now we get to the rest of it. Oregon, they're at 6. Alabama still at 5. And then your top 4, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, and LSU. And again, everybody in the top 7 stayed exactly where they were last week. All right, Jerry Palm comes back, joined by our boy, too, Barrett Sallee. Love seeing him here. Jerry, I'll start with you. Your reaction to the 1 through 25. What's the first thing that jumped out at you when you saw the new list?
Minnesota stayed in the top 10. I don't think it's really a big deal that happened. I just thought that they'd drop below Florida based on just Minnesota's strength of schedule. Even having added Penn State and Iowa is still really bad relative to these other teams. So I thought that they'd be below Florida. But again, it doesn't matter because Minnesota wins all their games. They're in the playoff, and there isn't anything Florida can do to make the playoff. So where they're ranked this week relative to each other doesn't matter. All
right, so he has surprised Minnesota in the top 10, but said it doesn't matter. They're going to make the playoffs if they win out. Barrett Sallee, what's your first initial reaction to the new 1 through 25?
The biggest thing to me, and this is going to be off the radar, it's USC in the top 25. And I think if you're Oklahoma and you're Baylor, you're looking at the back end of that top 25 going, oh, God, well, that's a team that Oregon and Utah both beat. And clearly the Pac-12 is being well represented and viewed favorably by the committee. So I think that's the biggest thing that jumped out to me. Oklahoma didn't get much of a bump at all because of what happened this past weekend. And Utah and Oregon got a sneaky quality win in the back end of that top 25 that, quite frankly, I don't think is going anywhere.
Wait, who did Utah lose to? I thought Utah lost. Didn't Utah lose to SC?
USC, I'm sorry, yeah, right.
Right, so they don't get that but their loss doesn't look as bad.
But it's a good loss.
Because now it's a ranked team as well. I know what you're saying. Either way, whatever you did, you have another opponent, whether it be win or loss, that ends up in the top 25. I got where you were going. So now when you look at this list, look, the key question for the rest of the year is, who can be that number 4 team, right? We sort of figure that the top 3, some way, shape, or form, is going to be that top 3. Georgia right now there, but they're going to have to play LSU in that SEC title game. So when you look at who can be number 4, who's in better shape, who's in worse shape of the teams that want to get to that number 4 that have a realistic chance to get there? Barrett, you're first.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's in a whole lot of trouble because they didn't get much of a bump after what happened against Baylor. And if they beat Baylor again, how much will that resonate? If it didn't resonate that much this time around, now granted that game played out in a way that I think the committee could pick apart, but you're not going to get much of a bump if you're Oklahoma and you go beat Baylor, and really vice versa if Baylor goes and beats Oklahoma. So I think that if you're going to try to figure out what's the most concerning team, which team should be scared that they can't play themselves in, it's Oklahoma and it is Baylor, whichever one of those 2 teams wins out, because they're not going to get a bump. And like I said, the teams that can get in, Penn State's basically controls its own fate. Minnesota does too. Utah and Oregon, maybe not. But, of the top 10, I think Oklahoma's the one you have to look at and scratch your head and say, where do we go from here?
Jerry, what do you think when you're looking at this list? Go ahead, floor is yours.
Do or do not, there is no maybe when it comes to controlling your own fate. And Oregon and Utah do not control their own fate. Minnesota, Penn State, yes, but those 2 don't. Oklahoma does not, and Alabama does not. And frankly, the one that needs to be the most worried is Alabama, because they have to go beat Auburn with Mac Jones at quarterback against that great defense on the road. So But Oklahoma still has two teams in the rankings left on their schedule. Oklahoma State is still in the rankings this week, as is Iowa State, a team they've already played. And then again, Baylor in the Big 12 championship game. So there's still a little movement for Oklahoma. There's no sure thing, but the nice thing for the Pac-12 teams is that they both win out if they're going to get an 11-1 opponent in that title game, and that could be a key for them.
So with Oregon and Utah, we looked at their schedule. Very manageable. I got to assume the percentages of both of those teams running the table is pretty darn good winning their last two. If they show up in a Pac-12 title game and win, would it matter who won? Or are they basically, is it just the Oregon-Utah winner? Could you ever see a day where the committee sort of thinks that if Oregon wins, they're ahead of Oklahoma, but if Utah wins, they're behind Oklahoma type of thing? Or are they essentially tied together and they're just the Pac-12 champion, whoever it may be? Jerry.
Oregon has got the better schedule because of the non-conference game with Auburn. So Oregon is the better candidate in that league. And yes, you could see the committee choose Oklahoma over Utah, but maybe not Oregon. I think they might take Oklahoma either way. And by the way, these last few games, style points matter. It's not just resume.
Yeah.
And I don't care what the committee says. Style points definitely matter. The bad thing for Oregon, though, if Auburn is a common opponent with Alabama, if Alabama does actually beat Auburn, now they've got a common opponent that works in Alabama's favor. Although I still think the committee is not going to like Alabama's entire resume enough to put them in ahead of a 12-1 conference champion.
Yeah, and to play devil's advocate, Jerry, though, that Alabama team would have beaten Oregon with a backup quarterback on the road. So I think that in terms of commonality and common opponent,
that is assuming
that is
assuming facts, not in evidence, Barrett. That's the transitive property, and we know that doesn't work in sports. You can't argue that.
I understand that. I understand. Well, I understand
and the committee sure won't pay
they look
attention
at
to
how
that.
games go down. They look at how games go down. If you have a backup quarterback on the road against a good defense, it's a little tougher.
Oh, I agree.
But I'm just saying
what it means. What it means.
That I think would play itself out in a very interesting way because I agree with you. I think Oregon, in terms of the Pac-12 teams, absolutely has going to have the better resume if they do win out. But I think you mentioned Oklahoma and maybe them having a case. I think it does sort of depend on how they look to me because eye test does matter. And like you said, style points matter. Well, it was last weekend, the second half against Baylor, was that Oklahoma's defense finally clicking? Because if it does, and they do play good defense from here on out, okay, then maybe they look at them a little differently than, say, we normally do with Oklahoma compared to, I think, Oregon and Utah teams that, by and large, are rather complete. We can talk about is, but they both play great defense and they both have a good offense. So I think Oklahoma, of all the teams out there, they're the one that I think needs style points more than anything else at this point.
All right, and then finally, there's a little bit of you owe us, right? I mean, if you're the Pac-12, you've shut me out 2 straight years. If I get a one-loss champion and you take a team that didn't even make their conference championship game with a backup quarterback that doesn't have a good win on the whole schedule over us, they're going to go crazy. Any thought that the committee, made up of human beings, says, hey, we've kind of shafted the Pac-12 last couple of years, we owe them. Does that even factor in, Barrett?
No, absolutely not. If all you got is you owe us, you got nothing. That is absolutely not a factor at all.
But it's not all they have, Jerry. That's sort of a, we got a one-loss champion.
That's not a thought. That's not a thought. They're not looking at what happened in the past. They're not looking at who isn't making it and who. This is not a democracy in that sense. We're not giving handouts here. You've got to earn it on the field, and that's how they're going to be evaluated. And if you didn't make it last year, too bad. You may not make it this year. You may not make it next year. You don't like it, get better.
Yeah, I'm with Jerry. I mean, I love the fact that we can evaluate each season based on whatever the landscape of college football delivers you on a silver platter. Last year has nothing to do with it. Next year has nothing to do with it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with Jerry. It's not supposed to happen. I hope to God it does not happen because if they do have that kind of mindset within that committee room, if any of those voters or committee members do think like that, then they should have their vote revoked because last I checked, what happened last year, what happened the year before that, that really has nothing to do with what's going on right now.
Yeah, but Barrett, hold on. You guys are kind of peeing on my leg and telling me it's raining, because every year we think about Alabama and there's a reputation factor there of what they did last year and the year before and the year before that and the year before that. If you look at Alabama this year, they don't have a good win on their schedule. They won't have a good win on their schedule. It would completely be on reputation. So you can't possibly look me in the eye and tell me that reputation isn't going to factor in here, right, Barrett?
Right. But
Thank you.
EK, they're not in the playoff right now, like that. So you're saying that hypothetically, and look,
I'm saying the committee has done it before. They've factored
not
in
really,
here before.
not really, though.
They haven't.
Because two years ago, Yeah, 2 years ago, it was a flawed system. There were no other teams that had a legitimate shot, and Alabama slid its way in because that's the way that landscape sort of evolved.
Then how are they number 5 right now without a single good win? It's because they're Alabama.
On their
really
schedule,
good loss.
except the team that beat them.
All right. To me, you have no good wins, but your loss isn't as bad. Okay, that's what. See, to me, they're 5 because it says Alabama or numbers on the helmet. It doesn't say Alabama.
Eric, style points. They've dominated every team they've beaten.
Great.
They didn't beat LSU, but they've dominated every team they've beaten.
Listen, you got Western Carolina this week. You're supposed to
matter.
sort it down there. Okay. Hey, look, you can beat Duke by 30.
And I'm still peeing on your leg. I'm sorry.
All right. Gentlemen, excellent job. Thank you very much. I can't wait to hear what you guys say, because you always defend it beautifully and do a great job. All right, where'd they get it right? Where'd they get it wrong? Look, nobody's better than Jerry and Barrett, all right? They know exactly what's going on. We got a whole new group of guys that want to tell you where they got it right or wrong. Plus, what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? Realistic things that could throw a wrench into all of this. Maybe your school gets in after all. That's straight ahead. Right here. This is HQ.